All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Allison. I am an educator at the St. Louis Zoo, and I am so excited to share with you all today what's the skull with two of my coworkers, Connor and Brittany. We're really excited to bring this multi-educator experience to you. A few things before we get started. You may notice that I have a mask around my neck. I am doing my part to help prevent the spread of the COVID-19 virus. But because I am in my home and not sharing space with anyone outside of my immediate family, I have pulled it down off of my face so that I can better talk to you all today. Now, first things first, we are going to go over our community guidelines. All right, so I see we've started a bit already. If you have not found that chat box, go ahead and open that up and make sure it's set to respond to all panelists and attendees. And let us know where you're zooming in from today. We're here in St. Louis. We would like to know if you're in our area or maybe a little bit farther away. If you have a question at all during today's webinar, next to that chat feature, either at the top or the bottom of your screen, is the Q&A, the question and answer box. Go ahead and type any questions that you may have during our discussion today, and we will all do our best to answer as many as we can at the end of today's webinar. We do have a tech person behind the scenes. So Connor's doing a little bit of double duty today. He will be running our tech, but then you will also see him during today's webinar as well. And at the end of today's webinar, of course, we also have our enjoyment poll. We enjoy doing these for you, and we like to know if you are enjoying them as well. All right, so our community guidelines. Please be respectful in the chat box if you are interacting with one another's. Make sure that we're using the chat and the Q&A function for appropriate questions and topics relating to today's webinar. And understand that if your behavior has been asked to be modified in the chat box, maybe we're not being so respectful, our moderator may select to remove you from today's webinar. Don't think that's going to be a problem with us today, but just in case. So, all right, I'm going to check to see where everybody's from really quick, because I saw some responses come in while I was going through that. So I have from St. Louis, Springfield, Missouri, Wildwood, Granite City, Rochester, Quincy. All right, cool. All right, well, thank you all for joining us today for What's the Skull? We're going to have a little bit of fun with this. We're going to pretend like you all are contestants on a game show with myself, Brittany, and Connor. And you're going to, like I said, be the contestants. And what we're going to do is we're going to go over some skull basics in just a moment. Brittany and I will be sharing some skulls with you, and then you will be telling us what skull you think it is. So without further ado, let's have Connor go through some skull basics for us. Take it away, Connor.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Allison. Like she said already, this is a really special day for us. This is the first lesson we've done with multiple educators calling in from their home. So I'm really excited about today. And of course, I'm excited to share my favorite skull ever with everybody. So let me go ahead and grab my favorite skull ever. This is a replica polar bear skull. So this is a plastic model, but it is an exact replica of the second largest polar bear of all time. One of my favorite things to show ever. Now we're going to use this skull as an example to show a lot of the similar features we'll be talking about in other skulls today. Now this is a good one for an example because it is huge, so we can find those features very easily. Now, the first one we're going to talk about is the Sagittal Crest. Now we have this too. It's very small and kind of hard to feel. Right in the back of our head, might feel like a little crest. Now on a polar bear, it's much bigger. So you can see this big line on the top of the head is the sagittal crest. Now that allows a nice spot for the jaw muscles, the muscles that give the animal the bite force to anchor onto. So right up here would be a big amount of muscle because polar bears have very powerful jaws. We're also going to talk about the mandibular process a little bit. Now that is the jawbone. The mandible is the jawbone, but the mandibular process is the part that hangs off right here, and it folds into the skull inside the next part we'll talk about. Now, this mandibular process is easy to find. If you feel your own jawbone and go back, kind of where it starts bending, that is where you'll feel your own. Now, when you open and close your mouth, you can feel that fold inside your skull, just like on this polar bear when they move. Now, the part it's folding inside of is called the Zygomatic Arch. That's a really big word, but it's basically your cheekbone. So if you feel, again, on your skull, right about here, you could probably feel a bone kind of going this way on your skull, and that's exactly what we're seeing on our polar bear here. So that is so big I can grab onto it. Now it's going to be harder to grab onto our own, but this is a massive, massive skull, and it fits that mandibular process perfectly. Now the next one we'll talk about is one that I unfortunately can't show super well on this skull. It was cut off just a little bit when they were making it. But you can see right here, this little hole is the ear canal. So outside of the skull, the ear would be connected to this hole. And behind it, in most mammals, we see what's called an auditory bulla. And now that would be a big mass right here. We'll see it more prominent in some of the other skulls today. But that allows a nice resonating chamber for animals to be able to hear. So the sound coming in kind of resonates and gives them extra sensitive hearing. So if an animal has a big auditory bulla, you know they're good at hearing. The next piece we'll talk about is the rostrum. Now the rostrum is the snout. So if you have a dog, you probably know an animal that has a very long rostrum. If you have a cat, you know animals that are kind of pushed in rostrums. They have very small, shorter rostrums, but they are present in all skulls. Now the Foramen Magnum is one that I love to talk about. I noticed somebody in the chat already said that this polar bear has a lot of space for a big brain. You're absolutely right. Polar bears do have some massive brains, and we're fortunate enough to actually be able to see inside the skull where the brain would be. Now this hole is the back of the head, obviously, and these little bumps here are where the skull connects to the vertebrae. So if you imagine on your own skull, feeling all the way in the back where your skull connects to the first neck bone that you have, that's where the Foramen Magnum is. So that little hole, just like I said earlier, is the interior of the skull and where the brain would be. So kind of a cool piece there. Now I'll go ahead and point out, if we haven't already guessed, this is where the polar bear's nose would be. Now all of these little bones in here are really good for increasing the surface area. So if an animal has a lot of swirly bones in their nose, you know that they are picking up more smells than animals that don't have a lot of swirly bones. And that means polar bears are great at smelling. We can tell just from the skull. We don't even have to ask a polar bear, which is kind of cool. We also have what are called the orbits. That's where the eyes would be. So this nice big hole here is a pretty obvious eye hole. Now it's not always obvious to see on every skull. So we'll have to watch out for orbits, the nose. We already pointed out the position of the ear, and of course the mouth. Now, in my opinion, the mouth is the most important part of the skull when identifying. Now, some people might say otherwise, but I love to pay attention to the animal's mouth because it tells us a lot about the animal, especially what they eat. So if you look into a polar bear's mouth, we see a lot of big, pointy teeth. Now, this is an animal that probably needs to grab onto food, and if it's pointy, there's a chance that food could be trying to escape. Now, an animal like a cow doesn't need pointy teeth because they don't need to chase their food. Their food is on the ground, it's grass. It's not hard to catch. So when we see animals with flat, grinding teeth like molars, we know that they eat plants, just like the molars in the back of our mouth. But when we see animals with pointy canines and flat, cutting incisors, kind of like what we have, we know they also eat meat. So contrary to what a lot of people think, polar bears are like us. They are omnivores. They can eat both plants and meat. And we can tell that just from their teeth. So again, we don't even have to ask the polar bear. We're able to tell a lot about them just from looking at their skull. Now, I hope those basics help us as we move forward. There's a lot of cool things that we'll be focusing on with these skulls. We may talk about some of these parts. We might not get to all of them, but each one will be helpful in identifying the animal and what they do in their lives. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Allison, and we'll go ahead and guess our first skull.
Thank you so much, Connor, for that overview. I know that was a lot to shove in your skull, in your brain, but like you said, we will be going over some of these features with our other skulls. So are you ready, contestants, for mystery skull number 1? So excited. All right, here we go. Drum roll, please. Mystery skull number 1. Just do a quick little look right here. Right, and start using your scientific powers of observation to take a look at this skull. So one of the features that Connor talked about was a rostrum, and this animal, this nose, is pretty long. And when you're looking at skulls, sometimes if an animal has an elongated skull and elongated rostrum, that can give us a clue that it may be more in the canine family than the feline family. And when we think taxonomically in terms of how scientists organize things, those can be 2 pretty large umbrellas. So first of all, think broader than just regular cats and dogs. Maybe which animals are more cat-like or more dog-like, right? So we have a nice long rostrum. Connor also mentioned placement of the orbits, right? Where we want to look for those eyes. And on this one, it can kind of look like it has a huge space for an eye, for an orbit. So I'm going to hold my hand, and I don't do it quite as well as Connor, and make a circle to show where those eyes would be in the skull. Right, so this animal has really large forward-facing eyes. And if you know anything about animals where their eye placements are, maybe forward-facing eyes could give us a clue about their lifestyle and what they need to do to survive some of those adaptations. So I'm going to take the bottom mandible off here for just a moment so that I can show you this part a little bit better. And here's our zygomatic arch. There's not a huge amount of space. And also, unlike our polar bear, there's not really much of a sagittal crest, right? There's still some lumps and bumps that are good for muscle attachment, but nothing like on that polar bear skull. All right, so the last thing we're going to look at before I give you 3 options to guess from is an up close version of this teeth. And I am going to use this lower mandible to show you the teeth. All right, I am noticing that these teeth are pretty much the same. They're pretty uniform. These front teeth may look a little bit familiar, like in our polar bear. These nice large canines. Right? And you can type in the chat what you think these teeth are good for. Are they better for grinding or maybe slicing and dicing and grabbing? Right? Okay. Oh, just kidding. There is one more feature I wanted to show you. So we have our ear canal right here, this hole, and then a massive auditory bulla, right? Or bullae, if we're talking about both of them, auditory bullae. So this animal we know has really, really good hearing. So our clues for our skull, a nice elongated rostrum, not much in the way of jaw strength, at least compared to a polar bear. Some nice sharp teeth, large eyes, oriented towards the front, and really, really good hearing. So let's go ahead and show our first 3 options as to what animal skull this could be. So what's that skull? Your choices are walrus, California sea lion, or harbor seal. And we'll pull up a poll for you to vote. All 3 of these animals are pinnipeds. So this is a pinniped skull, a fin-footed animal, a fin-footed mammal. Right, they are all water animals. All right, and it looks like our results are in, and 58% of you have guessed harbor seal. And you're very good, because this is a harbor seal skull. Fantastic job, everybody. This is a harbor seal skull. So one thing that I notice, especially if I'm trying to decide if something is a seal or a sea lion, our California sea lions, they actually have black teeth. And that's okay. They're supposed to have black teeth. They lack enamel, like what we have on the outside of our teeth. So they actually have a bacteria that grows on the outside of their teeth to help protect them. And if you look at their skulls, their teeth will also still have that black or that darker coloration as well, unlike our harbor seal. So great job, contestants. I think it's time for maybe something just a smidgen harder. So I'm going to throw our next mystery skull over to Brittany. She's going to see if she can stump you.
Good morning, everyone. Now that our brains are all warmed up, we've gone over some basics. I'm actually not going to give you as many clues as Miss Allison did. I'm going to just show the skull. So using our observation skills, what do you notice? I'll give you a few angles. All right, I see some of you are already typing in your thoughts. All right, let's go ahead and pull up our 3 options. What's that skull? Is it a great horned owl? Is it a bald eagle? Or is it an osprey? And I'll hold it up close enough so you can still see it. We're going to have a poll come up. Using your scientific observation skills, my scientist, let's decide what this skull might be. All right, the poll has stopped. It looks like this was indeed a tricky one. Excellent, excellent. Okay, so I'm gonna go over a few things and then I'm gonna tell you which one it was. So looking at those 3 options, you guys, most of you chose either osprey or great horned owl. And I bet you did that because of the coloration of the beak here. So that was one sign, one clue. So it is between those 2. Now, before I get to which bird this is, I will say all 3 bird options are part of a group called birds of prey. And if you are a bird of prey, you have some things in common, including they all have a hooked beak. They have long talons that are very strong with strong feet muscles. They have keen eyesight as well. Now, these rings here, you probably noticed they're sticking out. They look a little different. They're called sclerotic rings, and all birds have these, but this bird has really, really big ones or pronounced. They stick out further. This is something that you'll see in owls. So our secret skull, our mystery skull, is the great horned owl. Now, the reason they have the sclerotic rings is because their eyes are so big. When you look at the skull, or even when you're looking at the picture, you can observe the difference in the eye size compared to all 3. And because their eyes are so large, their brain case is actually a little smaller than what you might think. These bones are very important to support their eyes, and we can practice something too. Owls can't do this. If you hold your head very still, move your eyes to one side, the other, maybe up, down, maybe do a circle. Owls can't do that. So they have to move their whole head in order to see around them. Now, they have something that we don't have. So they do have some other adaptations, including more neck bones. We have 7, so you can take your hand and feel. There's 7 neck bones. Owls have twice that. 14 neck bones. That means their head can go much, much further, but not a full circle. You see, if a bird or any animal does a full circle with their neck bones, their neck would break, and a broken neck is not going to hold up your skull. One last amazing adaptation that our owls have with their eyesight is called tapetum lucidum. That sounds like a word you'd hear at a magician show, but it is a really fancy lens that's in their eye. And what it does is it takes light in. So when light goes into our eye to help us see, it bounces the light back. So owls, being more nocturnal, can see a lot better because they get more light into their eyes. All right, we have another mystery skull, if you guys are ready. This one's even trickier. So I hope everyone's very awake. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and show our skull now. And again, I'm going to give you different views of the skull, different angles. This one's very different than the other ones that we've seen so far. Now we have a poll that's going to come up. We have some pictures too, because this one is so tricky. We're going to go a little bit more general, and we're going to talk about maybe an animal group that it belongs to. What's that skull? Is it a turtle skull? Maybe it's a snake or a lizard. All right, my young scientist, let's get to thinking. We're going to pull up a poll now. And I see some of you are already putting in your thoughts. Excellent. What's that skull? Turtle, snake, lizard? What do you think? It's okay if you're not sure because we're all learning together. Science is about learning and sharing what we learn. All right, excellent. Well, it looks like most of you got it. It is a snake, but it's very tricky. If you've never seen a snake skull before, they can look very similar to other skulls too. Now I'm going to quickly go through some special adaptations about snakes and their skulls. If you think about our skull, we have really just two parts and one moving part, right? So we have the top and we have our mandible here. So we can move this up and down. Pretty cool. Snakes, even more cool. Their bones, they have more bones, and they're able to move them like the bottom jaw independently of each other. They can move each side separate. They can go forward and backward and side to side, which is helpful when you're going to eat food that's bigger than your whole head. So they have a very flexible skull for that reason. You'll notice their teeth. Connor mentioned that some animals, their teeth point in different directions. This one here, the snake, this is a black mamba. Its teeth are pointing towards its neck and esophagus, which leads down to its stomach. That makes sense if you are a carnivore and you want your food to go to your stomach. So it helps them to hold their food, and also as they're moving their jaw and their skull bones around, it helps them to manipulate and move their food where they want it to go. They do have little orbits, small orbits here. And if you've ever seen a snake, it looks like they're having an intense staring contest with you all the time. They could actually be sleeping though. They don't have eyelids like us. Go ahead and blink your eyes. Snakes can't do that. They have a special scale that stays on top of their eyes and helps protect their eyes as well. Now, this is a black mamba skull. This is an African species, and it is venomous. A lot of venomous snakes will have these long, large fangs, and they're more likely going to be connected more towards the front because they have venom sacs up above. And that's just a way that they can stay safe and protect themselves. Now, one last and final thing is how they smell. Snakes do have nostril holes, and that helps them to breathe air, but they have an even more unique way to smell their surroundings, to sense their surroundings. And it's because they have an organ that we don't, called a Jacobson's organ. A Jacobson's organ is located in the roof of their mouth. I really like this diagram because it can be a little tricky to kind of understand what that looks like. They stick their tongue out and they flick it in the air, collecting teeny tiny scent particles, bring it back into their mouth. They touch the roof of their mouth, which if you want to touch the roof of your mouth with your tongue, we don't have much going on up there, but they do. It connects to their brain from a nerve, and then that's going to help them sense if there's prey around or potentially a predator. Since they don't have ear holes like we do, they can actually sense vibrations on their lower jaw too. Snakes are fascinating. I wish I had more time, but we still have another mystery skull to go. I'm going to turn us back over to Miss Allison. What do you have for us?
Okay, I hope you are ready for the last mystery skull. And since Brittany prepped you so well with just using your power of observation, I'm going to have you do that with our last skull. And then we'll talk through some important features. Whoa. Maybe ending on a less tricky skull. Your brains have worked hard in this past 20 minutes or so. All right, so let's go ahead and show you your options. What is this mystery skull? Does it belong to a beaver, a rabbit, or a capybara? Let's go ahead and vote for our last mystery skull. Beaver, rabbit, capybara. So cool seeing all of your votes fly in. Ooh, bit divided on this one. Very interesting. All right, so it looks like a majority of you thought capybara. And you would be correct in the respect that a capybara is a rodent, and this is a rodent skull. So beavers and capybaras are both rodents, unlike a rabbit, which is a lagomorph. But I saw that someone noticed that the teeth on this skull are orange. And even though it is pretty large, it's not quite as large as a capybara. So this is a beaver skull. Right, these orange teeth, beavers have a coating of iron present on the front of their teeth to give them that little bit of extra strength as they're gnawing down trees. Right? And what's really neat is that this part of the tooth, the back part, is a little bit softer. Right? And if you aren't aware, rodents and rabbits too, these incisors grow throughout the entire life, so they need to constantly gnaw and chew on things to wear them down. But because beaver teeth are a little bit harder in the front than they are in the back, they wear down so that they're more like chisel teeth, right? Really good if you want to knock down a tree or a sapling to build your home if you are a beaver. Now, unlike our harbor seal, our beaver does have a bit of a sagittal crest right here, good for all of that muscle attachment. Once again, really important if you're using your mouth and teeth to chew down trees. You need a pretty strong bite. Something that's really special about beaver skulls that we don't see in a lot of other mammal skulls, especially carnivores and omnivores, is this space right here. Now, this space does have a purpose. It's called a diastema, and it helps the beaver manipulate food in its mouth as it's grinding, but then also gives space for carrying wood as they're swimming back to their lodge or their dam site. Last thing about the beavers, even though they are a rodent and usually prey, their eyes are a little bit off to the side, but they're also towards the top of their head, which is of course helpful if you're swimming through the water. You need to be able to see where you are going. So fantastic job, contestants. We had a lot of fun presenting this with you. So I'm just gonna check in the chat really quick to see if that there are any questions. And I think we can answer this, all three of us, real fast, is how did you become an educator at the zoo? So I majored in science in college and found out that I really like talking to people and sharing all kinds of crazy cool knowledge. So I just kind of found my way into it. But definitely if you like science and you like talking to people, being a zoo educator is a pretty fantastic career.
And similar to Allison, I have always loved animals. I was always that child that was outside over being inside, could never hold still, wanted to explore and learn and learn. And being an educator allows me to share my passion. So I have a degree in biology, and I'm actually getting a graduate degree right now because we are never done learning, ever. Even as an adult, we don't know it all. We're still figuring things out. And being an educator allows us the opportunity to share what we love and to get knowledge out there together.
Absolutely. I think Brittany put it perfectly. We're never done learning. Now, I became an educator because I was hoping to become an educator in a school. And I ended up graduating with a different degree for presenting, but also with a science background. And after learning and exploring my options, I realized that there was nothing else I wanted to do but to continue learning. So even though I don't have as high of degrees as some of my coworkers, I will always be going back and working towards that and making sure that I'm progressing and growing as a person. It's a really important thing to be keeping aware of. And I think this team and the zoo and all of the people in it who are so passionate really keep us and myself moving forward. Okay, well, thank you all so much. I'll turn it back over to Al.
Okay. All right. Yep. So that is unfortunately all the time we have for today. Like I said, we had a great time sharing all of this with you today. As a reminder, the zoo is open again. We are so excited to welcome you all back to our campus in Forest Park, but please be mindful and remember that if you would like to visit us, go ahead and make a free timed reservation on our website to come say hi. While you are there, if you are over the age of 9 and do not have any underlying health issues that would prevent you from wearing a mask, you are required to wear a mask while you are visiting with us on zoo grounds. And of course, practice good social distancing, 1 alpaca apart from one another, and wash those hands as often as you can. So thank you all. I hope you have a great weekend because it is Friday when we are doing this webinar. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye.